Now go on to our next speaker, Dr. Malika Goel, and she is going to be talking on hyperreflective dots and hyperreflective walls. On to you, Doctor.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank the ARC team and Dr. Chitra for this opportunity. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, so hyperreflective dots or foci were first seen by Koskes et al. In 2013. And these are small, very punctiform dot-like hyperreflective lesions, which can be seen in any of the layers of the retina, but mostly in the outer retinal layers, and are not confluent. They have greater reflectivity than the RPE. And importantly, they are not seen on clinical examination, fundus photography, or fluorescent angiography. These are only seen in the SD-OCT B scans. An important feature is that they do not cause shadowing despite their hyperreflectivity, unlike hard exudates and microaneurysms. As you can see in the right side, these are the other lesions, not HRF, which cause shadowing, unlike on the left side. And these can be seen in a wide variety of retinal problems, not just vascular, but also CSR, uveitis, even vitelliform and heredomacular degenerations, retinal arterial occlusions and venous occlusions, choroidal folds. Now, these are also sometimes seen in normal eyes and increase with age. And these are seen as hyperreflective dots in the base of the foveal floor between the ILM and IPL. And these are believed to be the Muller cells end feet or the ILM fibrils or vitreous hyalocytes. And since the Muller cell end feet are comprised of mitochondria, that might explain the hyperreflective nature of these lesions. So these are normal eyes, NFAS, OCT, and B scan, showing flat hyperreflective dots as well as elevated ones. And these are showing how these can increase with age from age 4 years to 85 years. Now, these were initially believed to be inflammatory, activated swollen cells or microglial cells because they are spread across all the retinal layers, and especially because they rapidly disappear during anti-VEGF or steroid treatment, but they recur whenever the disease becomes active again. So they are very rapidly appearing and disappearing. And also because there was a growing role that inflammation plays in AMD, so it was believed that these are inflammatory markers. Now, importantly, they may signify clinical activity and need for treatment. For example, this is a patient we had who we were watching with dry AMD and drusens, but you see when he developed fluid, there's a pocket of SRF, he also developed these hyperreflective foci. This is another patient who's being treated for AMD, and you can see that she develops these hyperreflective foci whenever she gets fluid, but at all other times, she does not have these lesions. So possibly they indicate or harbor, they're a harbinger of activity. If you start seeing these, you may expect that the patient may be reactivating. This was a study which showed that when the CNV, when the patient comes with active CNV at baseline, average number of HRF could be 12. Again, at reactivation, 12. But when the patient is inactive, the number of HRF is 4. So this is a clinical significance. What is the clinical significance in diabetic macular edema? The previous one was for AMD. In diabetic macular edema, if you see HRF, too many HRF, we have to be careful that when we start treating them, these may move posteriorly and accumulate, causing hard exudates, which if they are larger than 100 microns, hard exudates can appear, and especially in the foveal center, affecting the visual prognosis. So these are some images, not my own, which shows that hard exudates forming on treatment. So this is something we have to be careful about. What are the other theories of the pathogenesis apart from inflammation? It could be accumulation of pigment or proteins, lipid, lipoproteins, or extravasation from blood-retinal barrier breakdown in these diseases, or simply degenerated photoreceptors as in heredomacular degenerations or CRAO, BRAO, etc. These could be macrophages that have phagocytosed the degenerated photoreceptors. Now, do they have any prognostic significance? There are really conflicting reports. Some studies say that they have a good prognosis for anti-VEGF treatment. Some say that they are a poor prognostic sign and are associated with outer layer disruption, loss of and disruption and loss of visual prognosis. Also, there are conflicting types of results with anti-VEGF versus steroids, and there is no convincing data that steroids should be given when there is the presence of these versus anti-VEGF. And they're often associated with drill and other biomarkers, which may have poor prognosis. Now, this was one study which showed that bevacizumab non-responders tend to have a higher number of HRF, whereas dexamethasone responders have, bevacizumab responders have lower number of HRF, whereas the dex responders have a higher number of HRF, meaning that they may be more responsive to steroids compared to anti-VEGFs. But that's just one study. There's no convincing data. Now, as a corollary to this, they may accumulate in a ring shape in the cystoid spaces of DME and cause a pearl necklace sign. Again, the significance is that as they resolve, it may lead to hard exudates at the foveal center, causing poor visual prognosis, especially if the pearl necklace is away from the foveal center, at the foveal center. It may not affect the prognosis if it is extrafoveal. Here again, we see the pearl necklace intraretinal leading to hard exudates at the foveal center with treatment. So treatment can sometimes lead to worsening of the visual prognosis in the presence of large number of HRF. And lastly, we come to hyperreflective walls of cystoid spaces. I haven't personally looked at these or found these, but these are described as capsules of fibrotic tissues or fibrin in patients with DME. And these are because these are fibrotic, they maintain the structure of the cystoid spaces even with anti-VEGF treatment. Or they may not even be fibrotic tissue. They may just correspond to cystoid macular degeneration, because some of them have been shown to have straight or concave borders. So this is how hyperreflective walls may be, and they do not respond to injections. So that's a poor prognostic sign and may be associated with other poor prognostic biomarkers such as disrupted EZ line and drill, which extend may be longer, has been found to be longer in some studies with hyperreflective walls of cystoid spaces. And it is found in that DME remission at 18 months without these walls might be in up to 50% of the patients with treatment. But when these walls are present, the success rate reduces to 7%. So this may be an indicator of no remission with ranibizumab at 18 months. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mallika, for throwing light on these very relevant things which are coming up. But would it mean that having these hyperreflective foci is a poor prognosis, like these are the non-responders for anti-VEGF treatment? And would you think of trying steroid therapy in these eyes?
No, personally, I don't do that, Dr. Chitra, because the choice of steroid is always a second choice. Anti-VEGF is the drug of first choice. Steroid has too many side effects if the patient is phakic particularly, or the risk of raise. So I would not base my decision on this, and there is no convincing literature to say that it's required. There was even with regard to hard exudates, there is no convincing literature that steroids are superior. There's only one trial called the Bivortex trial, which showed that steroid may have a better effect, but by 2 years, both bevacizumab and dexamethasone had the same results. So really, there's no convincing data.
Srinivas?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, madam. It was a wonderful talk.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, my question to I think it's
Srinivas, there's some echo coming from your side.
Is it better?
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah. Unni sir and Raja sir, I had a question to you all. So as madam nicely described, so there's the literature also says there are few HRF, it says 2 to 10, then comes moderate, 10 to 20, and then comes many, which is more than 21. And they say that the hyperreflective dots, if they are more closer to the RPE or the outer retinal layers, they are more prone for ELM or the EZ disruption, which is again can be considered as a poor prognostic factors. So how do we clinically really look into, when looking into the busy clinical practice? Do we keep counting at this? How do they actually relate in the clinical practice is first question. Second question is, as madam view is that, of course, in the first year, Bivortex also showed that Ozurdex is having a better hand, but in the second year, both Ozurdex as well as anti-VEGF both came pretty much of the similar issues. But still, when it comes to perifoveal hard exudates, somehow I must be biased that I still use Ozurdex in these patients. So what are your views on these two aspects? Unni sir first and then Anand sir.
So I presume we're talking about diabetic macular edema and
Yes,
the
yes,
HRF.
yes.
So in this, what I believe that how do we treat these patients? I personally, I don't sit and count the number of HRF. But one point is that as in anything in retinal practice, it's about pattern recognitions. So when you have the heart, there are two things happening with HRF. One, as you said, the disruption of the outer retinal layers, which one could be due to a backscattering effect, and second, actual real disruption of the outer retinal layers also can happen. When we look at hard exudates, you're also looking as to whether these HRF are present in areas of spongiform edema, whether they are large turbid cysts, whether it is the pearl necklace signs. And we know by clinical practice that the presence of a large cyst with HRF and the pearl necklace line is very prone towards a subfoveal migration if it is very close to the fovea. So again, I also tend to use a little bit more Ozurdex when I see a lot of HRF, but it is not mandatory that I use it. Sometimes it's just to kick off the resolution of the edema before I go on to anti-VEGF. So yes, there are some key features. How close it is to the fovea and what is the nature of the edema is kind of more important for me than the number of HRF. And the HRF comes into more significance when I have a non-remitting DME, that is over a treatment time.
Quickly, Anand sir.
Yeah, so that's what. So I'd like to just underscore that, you asked for clinical relevance. I think the clinical relevance is only really there when you're reaching a case with non-response. I think this is seen from, this Wang study, which she mentioned. In that, I think two things to highlight, and I'll stick to DME again, that when you start having non-responders, you find 75% of them seem to have a lot of these dots. And when you have a lot of dots, HRF dots, they will not respond to anti-VEGF, but they will respond to steroids. So that is the clinical significance. When you, after 1, 2, 3 injections, you are beginning to get an impression, the clinician is beginning to get an impression that this patient is not responding the way it should. Then you start looking at the dots, go back and check whether these dots are increasing. And if you find the dots are increasing, edema is just staying where it is, that is a point for you to consider giving on that third visit, either steroids with or without anti-VEGF.
Dr.
So that
Anand
is the clinical
Rajendran,
result.
Dr. Rajendran,
That is one thing.
but with or without the presence of HRF, in any case, if you're not getting a response with anti-VEGF, you would still now go to steroid. So it's not that you would go because you saw HRF.
No, that's what I'm saying. See, many people will not wait for 3 injections. Many people say non-response should be there after 6 injections, after 5 injections. The entire definition is variable.
Yeah, okay.
So if you go to, say, for example, the Johns Hopkins, the Wilmer, Dr. Bressler's things, do not talk about non-response before 6 injections. And to some extent, even the European, you also, they like to go a good number. But what I'm saying, in our scenario, with the patient sitting in front, we can't have those parameters all the time. But if you find that there is a profusion of these dots, know that this is a patient who is heading towards, even if you go ahead with 3, 4, 5 injections, your response may not be as optimal as you might with, jumping in with a steroid injection, Ozurdex or what. And perhaps if you look at the larger trials, with the MEAD trial, which looked at refractory DME, where they found a great response with Ozurdex, perhaps this translates over a larger, in a statistical manner in these trials also. So I think that is where the relevance of this comes.
It's a very good point. Very good point.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we can go ahead. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Malika, madam.
Yeah.
Thank you.